Hi guys, so today I want to do a couple of book reviews of graphic novels I recently read. The first graphic novel I will be reviewing is in two parts, and it is Boxers and Saints by Jean Luen Yang, and this was published in 2013. I found out about Boxers and Saints from Rincey at Rincey Reads. She did a video review of this series and I really enjoyed watching her review. So go and check hers out. I'm glad she did this review because it really made me want to read about this, and I don't think I would have read this graphic novel if it hadn't been for her. It's a color graphic novel and I'll show you guys the art. It's like this. This graphic novel deals with the Boxer Rebellion that took place in China in the late 1800s. It was mostly a movement that was anti-Christian and anti-foreign, and it was quite a violent movement, and there were a lot of problems that arose due to a lot of the violence that erupted. What I really like about this graphic novel is that it looks at the two sides of the story. So on the one side it looks at the Boxer Rebellion from the point of view of those that are going against the foreign and Christian influences in Chinese society, and on the other hand in Saints it looks at the life of a Christian girl, a Chinese girl who converted to Christianity and why she converted and stuff like that. And it shows her side of the story. Overall, I thought that the two books were quite balanced, and while there is quite a bit more discussed in the first book, the second book still had a very important message in it. The first volume, Boxers, follows Little Bao, who is a young man who sees firsthand the problems that are caused by the foreign intervention in China and by Christian missionaries, and how this leads to a lot of problems and a lot of violence. And he joins a group to overthrow these foreign influences and to take back China and to really restore China to its independence. And he joins, and you see a lot of a conflict within Little Bao, because on the one hand he really wants to fight for China, but on the other hand he's viewing a lot of the violence, especially violence he's causing and violence that other people in his group are causing, and he's seeing how his values that he had before the rebellion are kind of getting destroyed as the rebellion moves on. So I would say the most fascinating part of this is to see how he had specific rules in place that he didn't want his soldiers to overstep. For example, he doesn't want them to lust after women or to kill needlessly, things like that, but these kinds of things happen anyway, and he tries to stop them but he can't really, and there's a lot of conflict because on the one hand he doesn't want this to happen, but on the other hand he sees it as kind of necessary to be victorious. The book follows several battles, and it follows interactions between his group and the foreigners, as well as his group and Chinese people who have converted to Christianity. So this part I found really fascinating. You get a lot of backstory about the Boxer Rebellion. I did not know that much about the Boxer Rebellion before reading this. Now the second part of this graphic novel is Saints, and it's much shorter than Boxers, and this deals with a young girl called Four Girl, and she has a very horrible family life, and she ends up converting to Christianity, and her name after she converts is Viviana. So Viviana has led a really horrible life, and she has to kind of face the problems of being a Christian during this rebellion and the consequences of being a Christian during the Boxer Rebellion. And I really enjoyed hearing Viviana's story. It was very heart-wrenching and it made me feel very sad for her, and I thought that it was a really good way to present a different perspective on the story while still being quite sympathetic to the Boxer Rebellion. If you're going to read this book, I would go and read Boxers first and then Saints, and I definitely think that that's the way to go because Boxers has a lot more information, and you should definitely read both of these. Don't just read one. I think that they both complement each other really well. Overall, I really enjoyed this series. I would give it a 4.5 on Goodreads if I could, but because I can't, I gave it a 4 stars. I think if you are interested in learning about the Boxer Rebellion, I think you should pick this up as soon as possible and read it. The next graphic novel I'll be reviewing is March, and this was written by John Lewis and Andrew Aiden, and the art is by Nate Powell. It was published in 2013, and it's the first book in a series. The next two books, I am not sure when they're going to be published, but I will inform you guys in the down bar once I find out. book looks at Congressman John Lewis and his early life and then his involvement in the civil rights movement in the United States. It starts off with his early life and looking at him growing up and him coming to a realization that the society he was living in was unjust. When he was young, John Lewis realized that because he was African American, he wasn't getting all of the same opportunities that white kids were having, especially where he lived in Alabama and just in the South in general. And it looks at his path to realization, which I found really fascinating, as well as his early involvement in the civil rights movement. So we see a lot about the sit-ins and how everyone prepared for sit-ins, so how they prepared to be violently assaulted, basically. This book is very short. It's about 118 pages and I read it in one sitting. So the art is in black and white and I will show you guys what it looks like. So it's like this, and I have to admit that when I first picked this up, I wasn't a huge fan of the art because I found, because it was black and white, sometimes the images kind of confused me, so they would kind of blend together and I found it hard to figure out how to read it. But as I read it, I got really engrossed in the story and the art actually grew on me, and by the end of it I really enjoyed the detail, and especially I was really amazed by how much detail black and white art could have, and so I ended up really liking it by the end. I would say that because it's the first part in a trilogy, you didn't get as many details. I find that it was quite short, as I said, so you don't get the full story yet, you only get the first part of the story. So on the one hand, I understand that because it's a trilogy, they can't talk about everything in this one book. On the other hand, I wish I had the other 2 volumes available right now because I just want to read them right away. This is a nonfiction graphic novel, which I always appreciate. I have only read one other memoir in graphic novel form, which is Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. And I would say that, as with Persepolis, if you're a fan of memoirs, you will probably enjoy this. At the same time, if you know a lot about the civil rights movement, I don't think you're really going to learn much from this graphic novel. I think that this would be good if you don't know much about the civil rights movement because it really shows things in a very easy to understand way and really quite straightforward. But overall, I found it was a very worthwhile read and a quick read that you should easily be able to get through. So those were the 2 graphic novels I wanted to review. If you've read any of these, let me know. I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts. I really enjoyed both of these, and if you have or if you haven't, let me know and we can start a discussion. So that's all I wanted to talk about in this video, and I'll see you guys soon.